Is your Saturn 4 Ultra 16K broken out of the box? Are you struggling to get your supports off your minis? Are your minis even sticking to the build plate? Well, I am here to help you. I have been trying to get this printer to work for the last few weeks, and when I fix one problem, another surfaces. So, to save you weeks of stress, I will compile everything into this one video. So, if a later section of this video seems familiar, it's because it is. I think it would be better than spreading it out over multiple videos like I have done so far. So, what issue will we tackle first? Well, how about my latest one, which is the supports are welding themselves to models even though I have calibrated the machines using the boxes of calibration. This issue was actually touched on in a video review of the printer by Ross at Fohammer. The strength of my screen is actually too strong, believe it or not, and yours might be also. In his video, he changed the percentage value of the screen strength to either 45 or 75%. I have received a few comments also saying that people have changed their screen strength. I also have been talking to an electrical engineer to find out what he recommends as well. So, to save you time, I am going to collate all of my findings right here. I started off at 85% strength. The one saving grace with this printer is that you can print multiple exposure tests all at once. On 100% strength, my ideal exposure time for a 0.03mm layer height was 1.9 seconds using Cheo ABS-like resin in white. On 85%, it is slightly higher, but I've seen a few people changing their UV light strength to 75%, and like I said, I've had a few comments from you guys saying the same thing, which thanks by the way, because not only does the information help me and others, it also feeds the algorithm gods and helps spread the videos. I really appreciate all of you that leave comments on the videos. So I changed the strength down to 75% and redid the exposure tests. My ideal exposure with this white ABS-like resin is now 2.4 seconds per layer. Now that I had the printer calibrated onto the white ABS-like resin, I actually ran into yet another problem, which I'll get to how I fixed in a moment, but it meant that I also had to change my resin because I don't have enough to reprint the tank again, and I also have a lot of Sunloose standard resin that I have to use up. So I calibrated the machine again for it, and then I printed out the tank, and I'm glad to say it stayed on the bloody plate. We have a success. So remember earlier, whenever I said with the white ABS-like resin, I ran into another issue. Well, let me tell you what happened. I tried to print off the tank again with a 30 seconds bottom exposure time, which, by the way, should be plenty, and the same spot failed again. This is really getting annoying now. So I took some 400 grit sandpaper and lightly sanded all over the plate in different directions for a few minutes. As you can see, I just held the plate, but if you want a perfectly flat plate, then you should really be sanding on top of a glass pane or granite worktop, which again, thanks to those of you that commented about that the last time. Also, removing the supports was easier, even though standard resin is notorious for snapping while removing supports, but it was a lot easier than before. There also doesn't seem to be any loss of details from what I can see. This printer is actually fixed. I ran through several more plates of different minis from Miniac's range, and they all came out perfect, and support removal was super easy as well. It feels good to finally be back into the swing of resin printing after having so many failures before. I do wonder if this is a problem that is going to be common among all of these new 16K screens, as it seems to be a problem shared by a few of them. So, should you do this to your brand new Saturn 4 Ultra 16K out of the box? I have only personally seen a few people having to do this, so yours could be in perfect working order, but there is an argument of turning the power of the screen down regardless to give a little more wiggle room with calibration times. So what if you're having problems with prints not sticking to your plate? Sanding is, in my opinion, the last step you should ever take, and there are other steps you should try before you get to this point, which I'll cover in a moment. But as you're about to see, if you contact the manufacturer, they may give you advice that is, in my opinion, not actually good, but in the end it works. Sort of. I have had some really big problems with my Saturn 4 Ultra 16K. Mainly that the build plate is not level and cannot be leveled manually despite the printer having an option to do it. I sent Elegoo an email explaining my problems as soon as my last video went live, and they've responded very quickly, but like the printer itself, speed doesn't always mean better. They give me 2 steps to fix it, so I'm going to document if these fixes actually work, and if they don't, then I'm going to try some fixes a few of you left me in the comments on my previous video of the printer, which I do have to say, a few were helpful and some were interesting. One of the recommended fixes by Elegoo is to increase the bottom exposure time to as much as 70 seconds. That is a terrible idea, and I will tell you exactly why. Number 1, increasing the bottom exposure time will result in more wear on your screen and decrease its overall lifespan. This is because for the first 6 or so layers of your print, your screen is going to be on for a total of 420 seconds or 7 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, does it? Well, your screen is rated for over 2,000 hours of use, so those 7 minutes at the start of every print add up. Considering that what I have found the average bottom exposure time to use, which in my experience of using multiple different printers and resin, is to be about 30 seconds, that means you are more than halving the life of your printer straight out of the box. It may also mean you will have to change your FEP film sooner due to it being weakened by the extra exposure time to the UV light as well. For my second reason on why 70 seconds is a terrible idea is that when you increase the bottom exposure time, it creates a stronger bond between the prints and the build plate. And while yes, that's exactly the problem I am having right now, the thing is that it is only located in one area of the plate. But because the bond will be much stronger, it means when you attempt to scrape the models from the plate to remove them, the rafts can shatter, causing uncured resin to fire everywhere like toxic shrapnel and be a pain to clean up. But it also means you now have the increased risk of not being able to remove your model with some serious effort. If you have ever printed out the Rook model as your first print, you will know exactly what I am talking about. Leave a comment down below if you can relate. For myself personally, when I am 3D printing with resin, the less mess, the better. And everything about this printer goes completely against that, starting from the design of the plate to now the problem with this auto leveling gimmick. Bear in mind, I was having exploding rafts at 30 seconds with Elegoo's standard resin, and their response was to try and bump it up as high as 70 seconds. The other workaround given to me is to reload the cheat code onto the printer. My contact at Elegoo sent a standard titled Shitu cheat code 11 in brackets, so it is obviously a copy of whatever cheat code they are putting on the printers. The only problem is that there's no instructions on how I am to load this cheat code onto the printer. So I tried to Google it and find some videos, and there was none in my search. So I had to send another email to find that out. If you have the same problems, then I'll save you an email exchange and show you how to do it. First, you need to take the cheat code file and copy it onto your USB stick. Then, with your USB stick in the printer, select the print option, then USB stick option, and then the cheat code file. Press print and wait for it to tell you to restart the printer. Switch the printer off at the side, remove the plug for about 10 seconds, and then turn the printer back on, and it should be good to go after it installs. I tried to do another test print after this cheat code refresh, with this time at 20 seconds bottom exposure time, because based on my previous attempts, 20 seconds should actually be way more than enough. Now, all 8 printed, but the middle of the plate is clearly the problem. I am still getting failures relating to the middle. Even at 20 seconds, when removing these prints off the plate, the first one shattered. So now that I am out of Elegoo ideas, I turn to the comments and other people's videos to see what they have done and recommend. One solution I saw quite often was to use M6 washers in the screw posts to give some extra room for the springs to adjust. Luckily, I had this box of bolts and washers that Mrs. Sam bought when we moved into this house, thinking I would be good at DIY. The disappointment she has is immeasurable to say the least, but they have luckily come in use finally for this experiment. I used 2 washers on each post and tried to manually level again. Finally, I can tighten the screws down a bit more, and loosening them seems to actually make the plate press more on the outsides. But even with the extra room, that bloody metal, no matter what I do, it just won't stick. I tried a test print and it was a complete disaster. Only the front half printed, and what did print was only what I can describe as the first slivers of layers, so it's actually made it worse. Some of you commented to say about possibly tightening down the middle posts on the printer, as that's where I'm having the problem. Well, unfortunately, after disassembling the plate, all of these inner posts do is effectively lock the plate in horizontally. To check it wasn't just my adjustments with the screws, I tightened them all down and done the manual leveling process again. This time all 8 printed, however there were some pieces missing, and again they were all slivers. I don't know what's happening here, but washers across the plate does not work. I can say that looking back at Ross's video, this seems to be more for if your corners are not all leveled the same. So off they came. What do I do now then? Well, one of the comments was interesting. It read basically as, they never use Elegoo's resin. There, problem solved. Well, I hope they are right. So I changed the resin to some cheap JO ABS-like resin and tried it again with a 30 seconds bottom exposure. To my surprise, the exposure finders actually came out on the plate, and they came off relatively easy enough with 30 seconds base exposure. Surely the fix isn't just to use a different ABS-like resin. To test this further, I decided to dial in the printer more with some boxes of calibration, and then printed out a plate full of models that previously had failed before. Unfortunately, it isn't a case of changing over your resin and only using ABS-like resin. I still had a failure to stick at the same spot as before. I have 2 options now, either to increase the bottom exposure time or to sand that area of the build plate. My representative at Elegoo has advised me that they believe it is unlikely to be the plate itself, and to give the problem areas a few passes of 400 grit sandpaper, and to also reflash their new cheat code. So I did just that. However, when you're sanding a build plate, it is best to do it on a completely flat surface like a pane of glass. But funny enough, I don't have any of those lying about for some reason. So I did my best to just sand the bit that is giving me trouble. I tried to print again and it worked. So using 400 grit sandpaper lightly with a few passes is enough to get the adhesion needed. The backup I have had to all of this experimentation for this video is that if these steps fail, then Elegoo are prepared to send me a new build plate, albeit at the expense of doing a few more troubleshooting steps. But what I am more interested in is if you, the paying customer, will get the same option. So I asked Elegoo, and this was their response. They said they will certainly do their best to assist them, meaning the paying customer. Take of that what you will. I just want to say that I'm not anti-Elegoo. I genuinely just want 3D printing to be easier to get into people's homes for them to use, because it helped me so much with my hobby and my mental health. As a paying customer, You deserve to have the full picture so you can make an informed decision on a 3D printer that is costing several $100s. What I am recommending you to do is to watch as many different videos and reviews as you can on the printers you're thinking of getting so you can make the right choice. That means watching them from both big and small creators. If you do want to join possibly the best Discord in the multiverse, then scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description down below and become a Patreon. Leave a comment down below with what you think about this response from Elegoo and what you want to see from them in the future. I personally think the plate needs to be looked at again with the possibility of removing auto leveling. Controversial. But in the meantime, if you want to see another honest take that I have on a printer I have used, then you should watch this video next. As always, I just want to give a huge thanks to all my Patreons and channel members because without your constant support, honestly, none of this is possible, and I'll see you all in the Discord.